Welcome back to the Royal Buzz podcast, where legacy meets leadership and purpose meets the crown. Your go-to podcast that's buzzworthy and dedicated to purpose-driven leadership, legacy, and authority-driven storytelling. Where Hive meets hype, listen to the magic, one story at a time. I'm your host, Trena Myers, Miss Elite United USA and Queen Bee of the Creative Agency. And today's episode is one that will have our audience walking away feeling capable, courageous, and ready to sprinkle change into their own lives. What if the biggest thing standing between you and the life you want isn't your circumstances, but the story you keep telling yourself about them? What if 50 isn't the beginning of the end, but the moment you finally begin? Today on the Royal Buzz podcast, we're joined with best-selling author and speaker Debbie Weiss, a powerful voice on midlife reinvention, caregiving, loss, and what it really takes to build after years of putting everyone else first. For decades, Debbie believed her struggles, weight battles, infertility, caregiving, widowhood, defined what was possible for her life. But at 50, everything shifted. Instead of waiting for circumstances to change, she changed how she showed up. Now, through her books on Second Thought, Maybe I Can, and The Sprinkle Effect, she inspires audiences to embrace small, intentional shifts that create meaningful transformation. Let's welcome Debbie Weiss to the Royal Buzz. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Royal Buzz today, Debbie. I'm so excited to get in to know a little bit more about you and share your background with our listeners. I know that I have quite a few individuals who've also gone through some midlife changes. For those of us who are in our 50s and older crowd, I know we'll greatly appreciate to hear about the struggles and the challenges that you've been through and how you've overcome it. So, thank you so much for being a guest. If you wouldn't mind telling our audience a little bit more about you, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. So, I have been a family caregiver since I was 17 years old. My father had a massive stroke. He survived, thank goodness, but he was permanently disabled, and my parents divorced, and he became my responsibility for the next 30 years. And,
Wow.
not really what you're expecting when you're that young or
Right.
and everything. And anyway, and then my life just kind of continued on the caregiving circuit, so to speak, when my oldest son at 2 was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And then later on, my husband suffered from a variety of both mental and physical illnesses for years. And I was giving everything to everyone and nothing to myself. And I kind of had an aha moment around the age of 50. And now here it is, 12 years later, I'm 62, and I've been on a journey for the last decade discovering myself and really changing my life.
Wow. I think a lot of us have that moment around that pivotal time frame. I know I went through that myself. And fortunately have not had to be so much of a caregiver as much as I'm the person who needs the caregiving.
Yes.
So, but I know that it's so easy to get into that victim mentality and allow things like the challenges that we go through in life to just bring you down. How did how did you come up and over that?
You know, it took me decades. I didn't realize until I did start on this path of self discovery that I did have a victim mentality. It was a term that I never had heard of before. And I really, if I'm being honest, never stopped to take a hard look to, realize that that's what I was doing. I was blaming everyone and everything for, where I found myself in life.
Right, it's not like it's something that we're taught, I know I never was taught that in school of, how do you overcome these challenges?
No, I wish that that was part of our school's curriculum because I think that so many of us are never exposed to these concepts until later in life, and not that it's ever too late because I don't believe it is ever too
Right.
but it still would have been nice to know that when we're in our 20s and
Exactly. I mean, I know that you're still gonna make mistakes. You're still going to, take a left when you should have taken a right. Those are things that you just have to learn to get through. However, having a different mindset could definitely change the trajectory of where you go in life.
yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, my I have 2 sons, they're in their 20s and struggling with a whole bunch of different things, and I'm thinking to myself, "Why can't they listen to me?" Um, it's like, you don't listen to your mother. When
Right.
somebody else says it, then they listen. I think to myself, "Oh my goodness, here I am out here talking about all these concepts and my own kids aren't embracing them." That's not a good but I
I
think
think most of us have gone through that same challenge with our children.
yes.
So, one of the things that I was reading about you in your bio that I found really fascinating is the foundation for your memoir, On Second Thought, Maybe I Can. And excuse me, you had the opportunity to share that on the Kelly Clarkson show. How exciting!
Oh my goodness, it was exciting and terrifying and all the things. I, was very lucky to have that opportunity. I was on, November of 2023 for National Family Caregiver Month. November is National Family Caregiver Month, and I was a virtual segment that she does at the very end of every show, so I wasn't
Yes.
there sitting on her couch.
Man,
Yeah, I know. Actually, it's so funny you say that. When I talk to the producer, you talk to the producer, they kind of like give you show you the rope
right.
and you don't meet Kelly until you're ready to record.
Yeah.
I said, well, I live in New Jersey. I really can get to New York in a split second, and be there in person. And they just laughed and said, no, no, this segment is virtual. I tried.
Hey, you have to give yourself credit for that.
Yes.
So, can you tell us more about your memoir and a little bit about that episode? What did you share?
Well, on the episode, I just shared how my life had been about caregiving and that I was always putting myself last because I thought taking care of myself was selfish. I had to take care of everyone else. And I think that as women in general, so many of us do that. We're natural caregivers. And whether it's our kids or our spouses or the people we work with, we want to make sure that everybody else is happy and taken care of. And I was running in so many different directions. I own a small insurance agency. So I'm worried about my team and my clients and my kids and my father and my husband and all the things. And so I finally after 50 came to realize that prioritizing myself is not selfish because I
Right.
was showing up for all those people not as I truly wanted to because I was always stressed, overwhelmed, ready to just blow in an instant. Someone could look at me sideways and all of a sudden I'd flip out. And it was because I was not giving myself what I needed. It's, that old adage that is cliche, but like in an airplane, you've got to put your own oxygen mask on first before you help someone else. And I was not
Absolutely.
doing that. And for decades, and it finally just, you know, took over, and I knew something had to change.
Sure, and that's something, I have an adult daughter, and she runs ragged like that too. She's got 3 young kids at home under the age of 9, and, like, "Remember, where's your oxygen?" You know? You gotta
Yeah.
take care of yourself before you could take care of anyone else.
It's not easy. It's not easy because I think we're conditioned that that means that, we don't love those people as much or we're being selfish. And it really just a little bit, it doesn't take much. And it really makes all the difference for your own mental and physical well being. Because, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but when you look at the caregiving statistics, the caregiver winds up getting sick because they don't pay attention to themselves.
Right,
And then how can you help the person that you want to, that you're caring for?
right, exactly. So, what became the change of that? Not only, your age, that wisdom that comes along with it, but, you know, you did something about it.
I did something about it. And I think that that's the key. So many of us think and dream and long for something different. And I came to that realization that if I wanted something different, no fairy godmother was coming down from above to save me. I wish that was the case. But,
Right,
I, had to be honest with myself and I needed to do something. I didn't know what that something was. I didn't have a dream. So many people always wanted to write a book or be a musician or an artist or whatever. I didn't have that. I didn't have anything in particular that I wanted. I just knew that I had to explore what that might look like. What was my dream? And even though I didn't know what it was, I needed to do something to just shake up where I was at that time in my life. And I just really looked at my overall life. If you've ever seen, that wheel or something where it breaks down the different categories of your life: work, money, spirituality,
yes.
relationships, and so I didn't realize at the time that I was doing this. It wasn't as organized, let's say, at then. But if you just take a look at all those different areas of your life, maybe something needs to improve in all of those areas. It's certainly a possibility. What's the one area that you really know has to change? And
Um,
that's what I did. For me, it was my weight. I've struggled with my weight literally since the day I was born. And at 50, on or around 50, I was over 100 pounds overweight. And over the years, I gained and lost, 1,000 pounds.
uh-huh.
Not like I had never done it before. But I knew then that in order for me to move forward with my life, to care for my loved ones, that's where I needed to start. But I needed to do something differently because like I said, I'd lost weight a billion times in the past, but the weight always came back. And I knew that I had to do something differently because, like Albert Einstein says, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result.
And that was the first thing that popped into my head
Yeah.
when you said that.
Yep.
So, is that where, the sprinkle effect came into play?
Yes and no. I i- l- in retrospect, what I wound up doing with the whole weight loss journey was sprinkling in small changes at a time. But the sprinkle effect came to be because when I wrote my memoir, I had to decide if I wanted it to be a memoir, if I wanted to, tell some stories and then at the end of each chapter come in and kind of give a perspective based on where I was now. And I decided that I wasn't going to do that. So, on second thought, maybe I can is a compilation of stories that are together are an inspirational journey
Mm.
of where I was as a child and how I formed many of my limiting beliefs about a lack of self worth and self confidence and self esteem. And then in the middle of my life, all some many challenges that I faced, and then what happened after I turned 50 and what I've done since then. And that was all great. But then people said, well, but how? That's lovely that you've changed, and I wanna change too, but how? And that's where
Mhm.
the sprinkle effect came in, is that just sprinkling different ideas, things that we all have heard of, like belief and mindset, responsibility, action, discipline, resilience, curiosity, no new concepts there, but in that book at the end of every chapter and each chapter is talks about one of these sprinkles, there are 3 activities and a journal prompt for you to complete on your own. And I say in the book a million times, complete those exercises, because how many times have I read a book and it gave you homework and I was like, I'm not doing that. Right? I mean, I'm just gonna keep reading, I'm not doing that, and then you finish the book, and that's very nice, and you put it on a shelf, and you forget about it,
Right.
and what I've learned is it's the activities, it's the journaling, it's all those things. Nobody can tell you what you want or need, only you can, and by doing those activities, that's where you discover who and what you really are and what you want.
So it's almost like you are taking SMART goals and breaking it down even further. And that would be the sprinkles in life, is kind of how
Yeah, I do have some parts actually. I do have a chapter of direction that helps you figure it out and it's a little more concrete with numbers and all of that. But are you still there?
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's okay.
All of a sudden it went something. Y-
No
Device.
worries. And I can edit this part out too.
Yeah. It says I have just so you know, it says device struggling to record. This may be due to high load on your device. Try closing all other apps. I don't know. You don't see that you're struggling to record, right?
Hold on. Okay. Yeah. Mine, there was somebody who was trying to call in, and that's, I think, what I have a high spam call.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'll
No
just
worries. No
yeah.
worries.
Wanted to make sure I was talking and I thought it was disconnected.
Yep. No,
Okay.
we're all good.
All right. I forgot already what I'm talking about.
We were talking about
You were saying the
how
smart.
your sprinkles were similar to a SMART goal. However, I saw it as more of breaking that down into even smaller bites.
Yeah, I think I don't uh, it doesn't tell you how to make a smart goal. It really I would say the different sprinkles are maybe ideas where you need to self-examine, what are your limiting beliefs? Just making smart goals when you're not really understanding what's going on inside of you, they're not going to stick,
Mm,
right? Because
right.
you need to know there's always something underneath the surface that's happening that will affect your ability to, do those, take those actions. And you've got to figure that out first.
So
So
it's like the pre work
I
before
think,
getting to
yes.
SMART goals. Love it. So, what would be an example of that you could share with the audience of how that what does that look like?
So, one of the sprinkles that really to me was, I hate to say the most pivotal, but I think so. And that's a sprinkle of responsibility. And it kind of ties in with that whole victim mentality that we were talking about in the beginning. A sprinkle of responsibility says, regardless of the circumstances of your life, right? The fact that my father had a stroke and I had to take care of all these people, it doesn't mean that because something, let's just say, bad happened, what we view as bad, it doesn't naturally equate to the outcome as bad. So let me explain a little further. In Jack Canfield's book, The Success Principles, he talks about a formula: E plus R equals O. E is an event, R is your response, and the two together create the outcome. So E plus R equals O. My life, I never knew there was an R. I just thought something bad happened, so it's a bad outcome. And when you're doing that, you're giving all the power to that circumstance or that person. Maybe it's somebody who said something that upset you, or, a partner who left you, or whatever it is, and you're giving that the power.
Right.
Where even when something bad happens, that's the E, it's still always up to each of us how we respond to that. And, at first I looked back and felt badly about myself. But then I thought, no, this is actually empowering, because moving forward, I know regardless of the stuff that's going to happen, because it will, this is life. And so we all have things that are undesirable that come into our lives. It's empowering because even when those things happen, I now know that it is still up to me to decide how to respond and in turn change the outcome.
Absolutely. It's like this saying you can either give away or you can have control, and you have to give permission to somebody else to allow them to for you to feel bad or to take on that responsibility. That onus is completely on yourself.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, I love it. So, how has this changed your daily life then?
Boy, that's a great question. So, as I said earlier, I'm an insurance agent. And for years, I've been an agent. It's my second career, actually. I've been an agent for over 30 years, and I have a wonderful, wonderful team of women, kind of midlife women,
Mhm.
who have worked with me for many years. And I always, in my mind, felt that I had to be there, just like them, 9 to 5, or come in early or leave late. And if I took a day off, that they would view me as not caring. And we didn't talk about this, but my caregiving in my late 50s really intensified when my husband was diagnosed out of the blue with terminal blood cancer.
Oh,
And when that happened, I basically couldn't go to work. I would go in once a week. I would log in at home. I would speak to them on the phone. But for 6 months, I was barely present and they handled everything.
wow.
And after my husband died and I went back to work, and I said to my most senior person, who's actually been with me 29 years, how was it? And she shocked me when she told me it was empowering.
Wow.
And that's when I realized that I was micromanaging. I wasn't doing them any favors by being there all the time and micromanaging everything that went on. And that really gave me the freedom to say, you know what? I can create the life that I want. And it's a long roundabout answer to your question, but now every day is different, right? I don't wake up every day and say, I'm going to work 9 to 5, like so many of us do. Every day it's different. I meet different people just like I'm meeting you. I'm doing a variety of different things, whether I'm writing a blog, I'm now looking to write a children's book and be a guest on a podcast and meet people from all over the world. It's so exciting. And so now I've given myself permission. You know what? I go to my office 3 or 4 days a week, my insurance office, but that doesn't mean I'm there working on insurance stuff. A lot of
Right.
times I'm not. Or I am, not getting there at 9 o'clock. It doesn't matter what time I get there. And so I've given myself more freedom in the mornings. I make sure that I'm able to meditate for 15 minutes and not stress that that extra 15 minutes means I'm not going to get to my office until 9:30.
Right.
It's a fantastic feeling of not rushing and stressing all the time.
You're being in the moment and
Yep,
being intentional.
absolutely. And it's a completely different life.
Well, that is so inspiring, Debbie. And I just hope that our audience has gained great insight from your perspective and that thought that, or as your book, on second thought, maybe I can. And I love that. I hope our audience will tune in and pick up your book and read more about how your sprinkle effect can change their mindset and their impact and the difference that they can make not only in their lives, but those around them. As we're wrapping this segment up, is there any last thing you would like to share with our audience?
So I will share my favorite quote, which everybody knows from Glinda the Good Witch, that said, "You've always had the power, my dear. You just had to learn it for yourself." And for the longest time, I just thought that meant, well, Dorothy, if you just clicked your heels and said, "There's no place like home" in the beginning of the movie, you would have got. But now I've come to realize the much deeper meaning to that quote, and it really resonates that each of us has the power to do, be, have whatever we want. We just have to realize that we have that power, embrace that power. And it really comes back to that whole responsibility thing. You've got the power. Stop making excuses.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Debbie. And I hope that our audience walks away feeling inspired by your stories that you've shared today.
Well, thank you for the great conversation.
My pleasure. After hearing this conversation with Debbie Weiss, we hope that you feel seen, less ashamed, empowered, hopeful about later, and responsible for your next steps. Not feeling overwhelmed, not pressured, just aware that you can choose differently starting today. If anything resonated with you and you'd like to continue this conversation or apply to be a guest, visit our website at creative, that's CRE, the number 8, TIVEHQ.com, where you can also sign up for our newsletter for upcoming events. Thanks again for tuning in to the Royal Buzz, where you will discover inspiring stories, empowering discussions, and a whole lot of positivity.